This episode is for you if you have already transitioned to purpose driven business or want to hear somebody else's lessons, tough lessons, so you can do it differently a lot faster. I used to think that I could help everybody equally. And I've recently come to realize that this is not true. It might be obvious to you, it might not be, but I grew up in this mentality that the customer is always right. And you should never say no to anybody that wants to buy from you. And especially with the law of attraction, there's this default assumption that if somebody is attracted to you, that it's a good fit. And in terms of business, and what I have found in a variety of different ways, mostly minor ways, is that discernment is key. And when you are working on your spiritual lessons of discernment, you are going to be brought the whole spectrum of clients. And it's up to you to actually understand your alignment. And part of my problem is that I was conditioned to believe that we should love and accept everybody. And behaviorally, what this meant is that we should be inclusive to everybody. And this is something that's been really conditioned into me, that everybody's equal. We should all have the same opportunities. And we should all be on equal footing. And it's funny, when I was learning about gifted and talented education, I read this book called Living with Intensity. And this is an amazing book if you happen to be neurodivergent and suspect that you might be gifted. And I remember that there was a segment in there by a Polish psychologist, Dabrowski, where these authors of the book were citing his work. He didn't write the book. And essentially, this psychologist said that there were levels to transformation and equated this back to people's cognition. I remember being very resistant to this model because at levels 1 and 2, it was pretty much talking about unconscious people and NPC level, people that don't wake up in this life, never really question anything, and get spoon-fed everything. And Dabrowski said that those people could not change in this life. I was extremely opposed to this idea because I've always believed that we all have equal opportunity and that we all start off on equal footing, even if we're in the presence of discrimination, that that's a social flaw, that it's not a fundamental flaw, that there's some bias that socially we're excluding or discriminating against people for no reason on the basis of political beliefs or religious beliefs or gender or skin color, things of that nature. And so even though Dabrowski doesn't talk about skin color or race or anything like that, he does talk about this capacity of intelligence in relation to gifted and talented, which gifted and talented people and others, it's not exclusive to gifted and talented people, have a tendency of having this crisis in their life, this mental breakdown, and they don't just grow up being spoon-fed by everything that's given to them. They challenge the systems a lot in a variety of different ways. They're not always great at school because they don't always buy in to the whole system of grading and authority. And sometimes they do, but oftentimes some of the greatest minds drop out of college and start some of the biggest businesses and revolutionize societies in ways that we have no way to predict when somebody's in elementary school. So it's not just about doing great in school and getting test scores. It's about this fervorness, this quest for knowledge, this impending desire that drives you to ask questions. Why and how and can we do it better? And that's a very active person inside of this avatar that is housing them. Whereas, and to Dabrowski's point, people who are at level 1 and 2, even gifted people can start there. But even when they start there, they don't stay there. That's this differentiating factor, this it factor. But people at level 1 and 2, they're just happy to exist. They're happy in their 9 to 5. They're happy in their system, their structure, their marriage, even if it's unhappy. They're happy in the construct that they were born into, their identity, and they never need to look beyond because they're satisfied. They're completely entertained. That was Dabrowski's point. He didn't say it like that, but that's what I inferred. What I'm realizing is that he was right. And if you are a transformational coach, you will learn this if you haven't already seen this. There are some people that are suffering, but don't actually want to change. And they don't actually want to question their reality and their existence. And this is particularly dangerous whenever they are still in victim consciousness. And when they hire somebody like you, a coach, to help them out of whatever problem they're seeking help from. And some of them are quite vindictive and immovable. It's strange because you'll learn about this history of going against people, like perpetually suing. And meanwhile, they're squeezing blood from a stone from you, taking all that they can get, almost as though they're living in poverty, but living outside of your work, living in what some people would see as privilege or luxury. It's not always like that, but there's some perverse money mindset issues to where the people that they're hiring, if they didn't have boundaries, would be working for like $5 an hour. It's crazy. And the very act of imposing boundaries and questioning their abuse of the time or schedules or, there are actually people like this. If you haven't encountered it, then just be aware that it's predictable. You can get a sense of it before you sign the contract. This is why listening to content like this will hopefully help you. So very often, they won't actually want to change. And what I have found is that having a trial run is essential for screening the right client, particularly if you are trying to have high ticket offers and you're trying to work with people for the long term. I now don't even talk about my high ticket long term offers until after I've done a consult with somebody. I also now don't do any consults for free. I used to do them all for free. And I realized that I was giving so much value in 30 minutes that sometimes people didn't even need a book with me. And so I was only trying to go for the high ticket long term offers until I realized that I wasn't able to really filter who was a good fit. And one of the telltale signs that I found, challenges of working with clients, is when somebody has a rotating or a self-concept that is particularly defensive. And what I mean by this is the way that they think of themselves. They will want you to echo back positive things about them all the time. This is red flag number one. This is one of the biggest red flags and indicators that it's not going to work. And you can ferret this out really early, actually. It takes a little bit of skill, but it's possible. It'll come out in the consult. It'll come out because there is a pattern and a trend that when you start reflecting back to them, even you might be using the same words that they used to show that you're listening and that you understand them and that you're synthesizing their story. And what happens is that they start disagreeing with you on your reflections of them when you're using the same words that they used, the same stories, the same reference points, even the same details. But if your tone is a little bit questioning, or if it's not fitting into the I'm so sorry you've been victimized role that they want you to take, then they will reject it and they will start correcting you. It's so fascinating to watch. I could give countless examples of this, but I want to move on to other examples. And so in the consultation, if you find that you're having trouble, or in the sales call, whatever you do, if you're having trouble reflecting back to them anything without them getting defensive or correcting you, even though you're bouncing back almost with perfect precision exactly what they said, but they're being contrarian, that's how you know that you're working with somebody that is going to fight you the entire time on whether or not they need to change. And oftentimes these people, these types of clients, want an echo chamber. They want to pay you to be right. They want to pay you for you to confirm their worldview. And if they are in victim consciousness, sometimes they will want you to join their war. I even had a consult with somebody, we didn't make it past the consult for this reason, who the very first thing that they told me was, I want you to go and look up this person because I want you to ride along my trauma story with me. And I did not, because it didn't feel right to do that. But they were trying to enlist me as being somebody that was on their side, that would echo back all of the horrible things that they perceived that were happening to them without any responsibility on their part. And they were somebody who did not respect my time. We booked an hour and I could barely get a word in. And at the very end of the time, they got angry because I had to get off the phone because I have a set schedule. I did then. They were upset because I had to get off the phone, and then they put it on me as I was the problem for setting up the calendar invite only for an hour, and they were confused. I thought we had 2 hours. Why did you think we had 2 hours? What possible data are you working from? But you see, when you're working with people like this that are very stuck in their experience and their worldview, you can't have needs of your own. You can't have boundaries. You can't have an opposing opinion. And sometimes they don't even want to pay you, and definitely not what you're worth. But they will expect you to be available to them anytime that they want to talk. So it's important to understand that when you are stepping out into whatever purpose-driven work and you're working on discernment, you're going to be drawing people for you to see whether or not your views about inclusivity and loving and accepting everybody and bringing everybody into your circle is really true for you. This is what I found, that yes, you can literally love and accept everybody and be entirely inclusive, and you will have some wonderful experiences, but you will also have those that are locked in to their misery, that do want to escape from their suffering, but their escape from their suffering is taking advantage of you and you holding space for them while you're fronting the bill and the energy and the time. And you might not even get a thank you at the end. In fact, you might get a lawsuit. So, the other type of client that I now have learned to screen for, that hopefully will help you if you're new to this, is the blame shifter. And this is a little bit of a tricky situation, because I found that a lot of people go through stages of intellectual growth on their transformation journey. And it's always easier to learn from others before we turn inward. But the trick is figuring out who actually can turn inward versus who stays looking outward. And the craziest thing happened to me that I'd like to share. On my TikTok, I have shifted. If you're not aware, I help people find and keep their true love. And part of this is working through intimacy issues, attachment issues, and also understanding spiritual contracts like twin flame relationships. Also helping extract people out of karmic relationships. And I was doing a content piece about avoidant attachment and understanding it from this higher level perspective and how to heal it. And understandably, a lot of people have been hurt by avoidance. And a lot of these people are anxiously attached because there's a polarity. It's common, but not everybody who is in a relationship with avoidant is anxiously attached. So I don't want to overgeneralize, but generally speaking, when you've healed your attachment wounds, you're either no longer attracted to avoidance, or if you are, they don't bother you in the same way because you've healed that wound inside. So, for example, I had a very powerful spiritual contract with an avoidant, a dismissive avoidant, and we didn't make it out of the recognition phase because I couldn't believe how they were trying to show up to the relationship. I was like, really? Like, you're actually trying to build a relationship like this? This doesn't work for me. But because I had matured to this point, I didn't take personal offense to their behavior. And I don't have time to get into all the details. There are some great stories, though. Really like epic level avoidant and dismissive avoidant behavior. And I was amused by it. I actually was amused because I could see things differently, where I could almost see their 3D self and then I could see their 5D self. And I could see that our spiritual connection was at the 5D, but we weren't ready to step into that 5D version of ourselves. I had my own activations. So I'm sharing that responsibility. And so what I found is that whenever they were triggered, they would go into their 3D dismissive avoidant. And the choices that they made, I just found ludicrous. Like, at one point they were walking and talking outside of my door to somebody at work, a woman, and I could hear trying to make me jealous. And this is because I rejected them or they perceived rejection. I can't remember what time it was. There was so much triggering there. And so they literally, I think we were supposed to spend time together, and they spent an hour outside my door talking to another woman and flirting with them, is what it sounded like. After they got off the phone, I think they knocked on my door, and they actually had the audacity to ask me preemptively if I was jealous. And I was like, no, what are you doing? And because the whole situation, I could just see it for what it was. I could see the triggers and I could see the wounds. And I could see we had that type of dynamic where it was playful, where we could talk to each other like that. Like at one point, they said, "You have like a little kid inside of you." And I was like, "I know. And she's tantruming right now." And so that was the dynamic where we could sort of call each other out like that and it not feel heavy. And so when you see somebody's wounds and you're looking through the eyes of healing, what you see is not about you. It's really not about you. But when you're completely unhealed, you take things very personally. And what can happen is that it weighs on you with so much crushing pain, resentment, and because it triggers all of these wounds from the past childhood and things of that nature. Anyway, so the point is that when you get to this plateau of healing, you're starting to look through different eyes and things don't affect you in the same way. And when they do, it's this awareness, like you still have that 5D awareness as you're watching yourself act in these ways that are not in alignment with where you know that you want to go. And so that's when you start to make those behavioral changes. But you have to practice. You actually have to like reps in a gym, you have to go through the motions. You can't just learn it intellectually. So that relationship, even though it was short-lived, was very powerful for both. Well, I don't know for their part, but for me to be able to practice seeing the ways that I was active and the ways that I was healed from the past, because it was a mix of both. And so what I found in the comment section, talking about avoidance, intimately knowing them professionally and personally now, I was receiving a lot of hate from commenters that were still locked into their experience where they were unaware of why they were in the relationship. One commenter in particular, TikTok actually screened her comment. And usually, this is my theory, I believe that we all have like a social score. And if a lot of people end up blocking you, then you just get filtered into the other bucket. And I like to check my other bucket to see if I've missed any valuable comments. And her comment was a little pointed, and it was opposing. I don't mind opposing opinions, but I found it interesting and I found it somewhat constructive. And it went something like this: "Oh, geez, not another person trying to tell us to tiptoe around avoidance and not upset them. And they're just abusive anyway." And I unfiltered her comment and I responded to it. And I asked her what part of the video, and I echoed this back to her verbatim, what part of the video said that we were keeping avoidance, because that was her big thing. Where she said, helping avoidance stay avoidant. And that's not what the video was about. The video was about healing avoidance and the ways to heal avoidance by having constructive conversations with avoidance while understanding the reasons that they're triggered, how they're commonly triggered, and how to work around those triggers. And needless to say, the conversation didn't go well. She responded. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she said again something about there being abuse. And I felt the need to clarify this because somebody being abusive is not specific to avoidance. And in clarifying this, she went out of her way to say that she was going to report me, all because I made a video saying that people are abusive whether or not they're avoidant or anxious. And if you have an abusive relationship, you need to exit and seek the appropriate help, right? Because you brought it up 2 times. And that being avoidant has nothing to do with being abusive. But of course, there are some avoidants who are abusive, just like there are some anxiously attached people who are abusive. And she said that she was going to report me and said that I was twisting her words. This is what I find to be problematic with this let's include everybody and the customer is always right mentality, particularly when we are working on purpose driven businesses. When we go above and beyond to be diplomatic, we open ourselves up to people taking advantage of our kindness, of our time and our energy. And sometimes it's reckless. I don't know what she could have reported me for, but the fact that she would take action against me for taking the time out of my day to respond to her comment in a thoughtful and a constructive way, in an above board way, that she then said that I was twisting her words. So now I'm the perpetrator here, where she is acting against me for this victimization that I'm trying to be kind and considerate and thoughtful. And imagine for a moment that this was actually, we had made it through the process of me taking her money. And then imagine that victimization effect would then be amplified and multiplied just because I'm trying to help her, but I'm disagreeing with her and saying, look, if you're in an abusive situation, you brought it up twice, then I urge you to seek help. And so what happens is that when you are working with people that are very, very stuck in their worldview, the very act of trying to help them, even when you are using the material that they are giving you, I'm not the one that inserted any abuse talk on her. I literally worked with what she gave me. She misinterpreted my video because she was locked into her worldview. And she might even go around misinterpreting other people's videos, given the fact that her comment was automatically filtered. I don't know, but I have had experience with people who have been automatically filtered, and the quality of interactions that I've had with people like that versus people who are not automatically filtered are substantially different. The attacking, the verbal abuse that happens, the gaslighting, the misinterpreting of your words, there is actually a substantial difference. So by understanding what you stand for and the value that you're providing, it's really important to make sure that you are opening up a safe space for your channel. If you're a content creator, I blocked this person after that comment, but it's important that you are creating the space where other people feel comfortable and aligned with your mission and your values, and just accepting everybody and being all inclusive. While it sounds great from a utopian perspective and an idealistic perspective, because that's how many of us have been trained to be, it can actually shoot you in the foot because it can attract the wrong people to your page. And if you allow for your section, your comment section, to go into a misaligned direction where you are being attacked for helping somebody and you are being falsely reported and somebody's trying to harm you, or I've even had people try to get their friends to jump on my page and attack me because I was reporting the news and they didn't like what I was reporting. And that was somebody else who had a comment that was filtered, different channel altogether. And I responded to it and I engaged with them. And the shit show that followed was incredible. So there are people actually that will go out of their way to harm you in order to support their worldview, particularly if you are on their wrong side of whatever argument that they're seeing. And they might even be approaching you for help. But this is why the discernment part of your practice is essential, because finding the right client can make or break your career. It can just absolutely. If you have a series of wrong clients, you could just be just buried, and have no ability to support yourself, because very often the wrong type of client will not care about your quality of life. They will just care about taking from you. And this is the hard truth that I've learned. And some of the best clients I'm so grateful for, because they genuinely care about you as the person that is providing value in their life. Those are the people that you want to attract and maintain. They are kind, they are generous. Sometimes they go above and beyond in ways that make you feel like miracles are happening. And you don't have to worry that they're ever trying to harm you or stab you in the back or any weird things like that. But being aware that there is a right client is the first step.